Hello and welcome to Season 2 of Desire.Dilemma, a podcast that amplifies immigrant voices in America. I'm Funmi Apantaku-Onayemi, your host. Millions of immigrants reside in America. Every year they come in droves to take part in the American dream of better standard of living, better education, and more opportunities. Many came to escape war, violence, poverty, and hopelessness. With all the benefits of being in America, immigrants have also lost a lot. They have lost a great deal of what is familiar to them in order to fit into the American norms. For immigrants who are parents of young adults, the challenges are twofold. Their first challenge is the quest to succeed in America. The second challenge is to instill their native values in their children while allowing their children to fully embrace and succeed in their adopted country. In many immigrant homes, these struggles have created identity crises and disconnections. These divisions have physical, mental, and psychological implications. In our second season of Desire.Dilemma, we will discuss these struggles in immigrant families and hopefully help them align the desires to reside in America with their hopes of succeeding in America. Today, we have the honor of having a conversation with Dr. Yemi Fatoki, the Medical Director of Greater Heights Medical in the Chicagoland area, including Ottawa, Illinois. As a family medicine physician, he specializes in the treatment of substance use disorders, weight loss, and immigration physical examinations. Dr. Fatoki will share his story of being a young adult immigrant, the challenges he faced, and how he overcame. Because he was a young adult immigrant and now a father of second-generation young adults, he is our expert advisor to guide immigrants on how they can adapt to the norms of America, succeed and successfully raise their children to become significant contributors to America. Good morning, Dr. Fatoki, and thank you for being our guest. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Yes, we appreciate this. We think this is going to be quite a conversation. You have a fascinating story of coming to America and getting to the height of your medical profession. You are one of the go-to medical experts in the state of Illinois, not only for immigrants, but for Americans alike. In the Nigerian-American community, almost everyone knows your name. What made you leave your country of Nigeria for the U.S.?
So in secondary school, I always had a desire to come to the U.S. You know, at the time, we used to read Ebony and Jet magazines quite a bit. So I always had that fantasy and that dream of coming to the U.S. But like the real story is that after my secondary school, at Federal Government College Ilorin, I did 1 year of lower 6 at Government College Ibadan. And then I applied for an Oyo State scholarship to study medicine abroad. So you had to find an admission and then have an interview. And then if you were selected, you were awarded a scholarship to any country of your choice. And the agreement was that after you completed your education, you will come back to serve the state. So I got one of those scholarships, and it took about 2 years because I also did 1 year of preliminary UI. And then I came to the US after I got an undergraduate admission and the scholarship.
So Ebony and Jet got you started. Those were the magazines at the time.
Yes.
So what were your first impressions of America?
You know, it was a culture shock for me. You know, I mean, coming from a place of privilege and becoming a nobody, you know, so that was a big culture shock. And also the weather. I came in January in the height of winter. It was extremely cold, you know, so I wasn't used to any of that. My family is from Ibadan, and that's where I grew up, except for the secondary school years in Ilorin. So we were well known, we were popular, I had a lot of friends, and then I came to the US. I only had my uncle who was much older than I am, so there was that generational gap, and then had to start making friends, and I just knew, I didn't know anybody. Then I went to school in Macomb, There were not too many Black people there. I was a biology major. I think maybe I was the only Black person in my class and the few classes I took. And then there was one of my classmates that we became friends. Is Caucasian, but he and I had the same biology class. Then we also had the same chemistry class. So he started talking to me, and that's how I started integrating. So I was at the time, I think there were about 100 Nigerians going to the school. Most of them were agriculture majors. So I was the only one in pre-med at the time. So I actually met two people who were about the same age. One of them became very, very good friends with me. He's actually one of my best friends. His name is Rotimi. So he and I, we were about the same age. We had the same ideas. He had been in the US before me, so he was already, I think he had been in the US for about 2 years. He moved from Dallas to Macomb. So he and I became friends, and that really helped me to get settled in.
And then when you settled in, were you able to embrace anything in America in terms of the norms of America?
Well, one of the things that I appreciated the most was the education system. In Nigeria, like my 1 year of prelim, I think there were maybe about 200 people in a hall that was meant to hold 100. We never had any contact with the teacher, with the lecturers. No one cared whether you came to class or not, as long as you passed. So a lot of times I didn't even take the classes serious. If the professor was late, I left. If I was there waiting 15 minutes and there was no professor, it's like he's wasting my time, so I left. But in the US, the classes were smaller. The professors were very accessible. You could walk up to them and talk to them. If you didn't understand something, they could schedule you after classes to come meet with them and explain it to you. It was just totally different, so the education system was wonderful. Then, like trying the food, I got into the fast food, like going to fast food restaurants, ordering a large Coke without ice, and just being able to travel, having a car, even though it was an old beat up car, but just having that freedom, it was different.
Were there challenges at home and also outside of school?
The challenges at home was mainly because of the age difference between my uncle and I. So there was a generational gap. It was more like a father figure, is my mom's younger brother. So he had a problem with me going to parties with my friends and doing things because, like, you need to study. If I tried to buy things, or you're wasting money, so it was that kind of issues that I dealt with him. But at the time, I didn't go to parties unless I studied first. I was always in the library till 11 o'clock every night. On the weekends, they closed at 5 o'clock on Saturdays, but I will be in the library till they closed and then go out after that. So my studies were still a priority, but he didn't see it that way. And then I didn't know how to cook. I didn't know how to clean the bathroom because I didn't do any of those things at home. So I had to learn to do them. The first thing he told me is like, your parents are not here. You don't have any maids here. Everyone is for themselves, so yes. I had to learn that. The challenges outside, to be honest with you, Macomb was pretty racist at the time, so that was my first exposure to racism, and me coming from Nigeria where, again, I was privileged, and then having people like insult you or call you names or talk to you anyhow they wanted. I had a problem with that. Even the Black Americans at the time, they will call us names like Kunta Kinte because we were Africans, referring to one of the characters from Roots.
Yes.
So that was a challenge. The girls didn't talk to us. There weren't too many African or Nigerian girls to talk to. And I remember like when we would have parties and invite some of the girls from class, they will come, but their boyfriends will be waiting. So as soon as they came in, then the boys will come in, they'll take all our food and leave. And most of those parties would end within like 15 minutes.
Oh my.
So those challenges were there. I remember one time I took my car to get fixed, and the guy that fixed it, he didn't do it right. He took my money, and I was there like arguing with him about that. He pulled a gun on me, to get out of his shop, and that was the end of that. So we had to deal with those things, but there were also some good people, so I wouldn't say that the professors were nice. One of the challenges I faced too was because Oyo State was not paying our money. Like, they were not paying our school fees or maintenance allowance like they should have been paying. So I think after the first year, they didn't pay the school fees, so I couldn't go to class. And then when they paid the money for our maintenance, the school would take that and use that to offset the school fees. So those challenges came very, very early.
Oh my gosh. That must have been something else, though, for you. I mean, so you were missing your family, you're dealing with financial situations, you're dealing with racism, and also dealing with the issue of even dating, because obviously, if you didn't have Nigerian girls, or even if you didn't have African Americans possibly around you, that must have been difficult for you.
It was, so again, the finances were a problem. And my friend wrote to me, he was a private student at the time, so his parents were well off. After a while, my uncle and I, we lost the apartment because my uncle came on an Oyo State scholarship also. So Rotimi took me in. I ended up living off of him, to be honest, for more than a year. And I mean, I remember when it was time for him to account to his parents about how he spent his money or why his maintenance allowance was gone earlier than it should have been. He and I would sit down coming up with stories for him to tell them, because I was living off of him. One of our other friends was living off of him, and then my cousin was staying at his place too. So he had a 2-bedroom that 4 of us were sharing, but he was mostly responsible for everything. And then I didn't have clothes at the time, so he was the one that would buy me clothes and, and feed me and stuff. But I got very, very depressed when they didn't let us go to school, because the school, every time we were out of status, they reported it to immigration. And then I know one summer they tried to apply for a work permit for us, but by the time the work permit came, it had already expired, they mailed it, but it didn't come on time. So I know in the fall of 1983, I think I couldn't go to school. So the school actually sent the campus police to kick me out of my class. My mom went to do her bachelor's and my father was doing his master's in education. So it was a little bit easier for them to call, so that helped. But something else that really helped me was my professor. They had sent messages looking for me, that they didn't know why I stopped coming to class. And when I went to go, I remember going to go see my psychology professor, and he basically told me that he had no business with the school administration. He didn't stop me from coming to class. As far as he was concerned, I could come to class. So they allowed the professors. I think I was taking 4 classes then. I had spoken to 3 of them. They told me to come back to class and that they would credit me the following semester whenever I was able to register, that I didn't have to take the classes again. They'll just credit whatever grade I got. So that motivated me to keep going, but, like I said, the professors were really, really nice. And being able to do that just took a burden off of me. I was still able to make my grades. And I know part of the reasons that they did that for me was probably because I was a good student. I was doing well in their classes and I wasn't causing any trouble.
Yes. When you say all of this, it's amazing what's happening in the immigrants population, because we know that stories like this are still ongoing. They're still ongoing. So when we see the people coming to the country, we ask ourselves, how are they managing? Have you been around those who are new in America, and have you heard their stories?
I have, and the way I look at it is that for most people, I think we get to a point of no return, so if you get past that point of no return, then you don't have a choice but to keep going. When, like I said, I was in prelim, I quit and then came to start here. So I had a few months that I could have gone back and, told them at the university that I was sick or something. People quit their jobs and come or take a leave of absence for a year. So you have that period of time where you could definitely go back if the US is not for you or if the foreign country is not for you. But if you go past that point, then you're stuck. The friends that I left at home, they were still progressing with their school. So the one thing that I kept thinking is, how am I going to go back? The friends that I left behind, they'll be 2 years ahead of me. I just couldn't go back, and it would be shameful to go back home and say that I couldn't make it in the US. And when people quit their jobs, and that's what I tell them, it's like you leave your good banking job, you come here and start working as a CNA or working at McDonald's. You need to make up your mind. Once you get past the point that you can't go back home, then you have to keep pushing forward. I still think America is the greatest country. It's the one country that I know where you can start with nothing. And if you're willing to put the work into it and abide by the rules, you can become anything you want, except for president if you weren't born here.
Yeah. Something in my mind, and I want to share that with you and see how you see this. I'm beginning to wonder about the fact that we have young adults of immigrant parents. You've been here, you have your family, your wife and children who are now young adults. And I know that, at least for me, my kids were born Americans. I still hold to the Nigerian norms. But then when they're at home, I want them to be really Nigerians. And then when they're out there, they really have to be Americans, right?
Yes.
So I truly believe that because of that, we have a disconnection, not just me, I'm just saying in general. And so when we have that disconnection, I'm deducing that has caused a lot of confusion, rebellion, isolation, depression, right? And even sometimes substance abuse. And I believe that is crushing the migrant population in terms of their mental wellness. Am I accurate?
You're very accurate because, again, I was one of those young adults. Even though I was 18 years old when I came, I didn't have my parents here, but I was stuck between the American culture and the Nigerian culture. And I have friends that came on scholarships or came at the same time that I do that had the same issue. We all had problems for years, acting out in different ways and just a lot of personal issues with our life. I had a hard time, like even getting settled, trying to torn between marrying an American or marrying a Nigerian, and then the cultures don't gel. When you're with a Nigerian, some of them don't embrace the American values. When you're with an American, they don't embrace the Nigerian values. So you're stuck. And also I was lucky to have good parents. My parents, the one thing they always said, my mom always says, remember the child of whom you are. Don't do anything that's going to embarrass or disgrace your family. And when I was going through issues that I would call them, the one thing they will say is, you're the one who is there. We know we raised you right. We trust your judgment. So we know you will not do anything that's going to be harmful to you. There's a story that I tell my kids when I was going to school at Western. I was riding the train back from Chicago one time, and there was one of these guys who was very, very popular on campus. He was an African-American. And we're on the train, and then he asked me to come. He wants to show me something in the bathroom. And I'm feeling very, very happy, thinking, oh my God, like this guy who is very popular on campus is talking to me. I'm going to be in the in crowd. We get there, he takes out this small brown bottle, uncocks it, and starts sniffing it. And then it's a white powder, which I presume is cocaine. And then he offered me some. And the first thing that came to my mind is my mother is going to kill me. So I told him no. That even though my mom was thousands of miles away, I knew I just couldn't. And so, yes, it's easy to fall into that trap. Like I said, I was depressed that I started drinking, so it's the same disconnect. And that's when we are raising our children, we need to understand that we can't impose Nigerian values on them. And also that, you can't whip your children the way we were whipped in Nigeria, and no one even whips their kids like that anymore. The term that my father used is guided freedom. And that's what I try to do also, which is you guide your children, but at the same time, you give them the freedom to make their own choices. Some
I like
kids,
that.
They'll listen
like
from
that.
talking to them. Thank you. So some will listen from you talking to them. Some will listen and from seeing other people's mistakes, and some will not listen until they make those mistakes and try it out themselves. So that's the same philosophy that I use when it comes to raising children.
Things are a little bit even more complicated now because of social media. Would you agree?
I agree, but I also think social media is a good thing, because at least it helps with that isolation. There is good and bad in social media. You're able to reconnect with friends. You're able to reconnect with your culture. You're able to see things that you probably wouldn't see. I mean, like now Afrobeats is like real popular and our kids just love it. Everyone loves Afrobeat. So it's making the children feel more accepted because everyone is accepting Afrobeats. During my time, it was more like, Nigerians are drug dealers, and, you didn't see the good things that we were doing at that time. And I didn't see examples of Nigerians that were in higher places that I could look up to. Now with social media, it's easy. But at the same time, though, social media, people get bullied on social media. So when you run into that trap, it becomes a problem. The kids have to know how much information they want to give out on social media. You have to guard your information. I'm very selective about what I put on social media, and I try to avoid putting information about my kids or my wife or family members on there.
In all you've done, you've actually been able to marry you at this stage, and you also have taken us back to those times when you suffered as a young immigrant adult, right?
Yes.
So we're at this point now where we have to ask ourselves, how can we help young adults of immigrant parents today? I love the guided freedom, you said. Guided freedom, I love it. So outside of that, how else can we help with this situation in terms of this disconnection that we feel?
So I think we have to look at things from their own point of view. We as parents or older adults, we tend to see things our own way, and try to force the kids to do things the way we see it. That definitely is not going to work. It's at the same time, we need to realize that we are not our children's friends. We are still parents. We have to learn to communicate with them. It's not like, I'm your father, you have to do this because I say so. That kind of attitude is something that we need to change. We need to be respectful of our young adults and children, and just be understanding when they come to talk to us. We also need to acknowledge that mental illness and substance abuse is not an American thing. It's a human thing, and that we have the same issues that other ethnicities and communities have. We need to stop denying that mental health exists. We need to stop denying that substance abuse exists, and just be more understanding when we talk to our children instead of just brushing things off. A lot of African parents tend to do that, which is when the kids come to you, you just brush it off and, I'm depressed. Well, that word doesn't exist. Don't talk about that. That's not good. We need to be more open-minded and not just force our own ideas and beliefs on our children.
I think at this point we should actually discuss therapy. We don't want to hear that, do we? In our communities, we don't want to hear that. We don't want to hear, just like you said, a child comes to us, we said, depression. What is that? And we just want to jump. Go sit down and go read your books. How do we actually address this? And what must we do?
I think we need to talk more about it. It's a shame that Nigeria, with over 200 million people, only has about 200 psychiatrists.
Oh, really? So, I didn't know that. Oh, my.
So we know the way we look at mental health.
Yes.
We just need to talk more about it. We need to be more open-minded in our community that, yes, people get depressed. We have people who are addicted to alcohol, who are addicted to all kinds of drugs, both here and at home. We need to stop stigmatizing the treatment. We need to look at these issues, mental health and substance abuse, as chronic illnesses, just like we look at high blood pressure and diabetes. that no, there's nothing wrong with you getting treatment for your depression. And I'll tell you, I went to therapy for years. When I was in medical school, I had some issues. I was seeing a psychiatrist, and basically, after a session, he will tell me, "Oh, you're the doctor, so what would you do?" And when I tell him, okay, that's what you need to do, go do it. And then about 12 years ago, when I moved to Florida, I was having some mental health issues also. I spoke to my nurse at the time, who recommended that I see a Christian therapist that she and her husband saw. Because she said, I know you're worried about him writing notes and your information getting out, but she said, I can assure you he'll keep it private, he'll be confidential. I remember the first session I went to go see him, and the first thing he told me was, okay, why don't you tell me about yourself? So I started from childhood all the way to why I ended up in Florida. And some of those stories that I told you were included in it, but with a lot more details in between. And by the time I'm telling him and I'm thinking to myself it's like listening to me telling my own story, and all I can think about is, Yemi, you're messed up in the head. Your head is so messed up. That's all I kept thinking while I was telling my story, and for one, me being able to even talk that out and hear myself talk about my life made me realize how messed up I was, and then I was able to start working with him, seeing him regularly until, I was able to start dealing with the issues I had, but I didn't even care about the insurance, paying for it or not. I paid cash for the times I saw him, and I was seeing him at least once a week for quite a few weeks.
So you felt safer with Christian?
It wasn't more that I felt safer with Christian. You just have to find a therapy that you
feel comfortable. Yeah, you felt as if you were in a safe house.
Right, but it wasn't because he was a Christian therapist. Because I just gave him a try because the person who referred me to him, she's someone that I trusted, and her husband, they were like my family when I went to Florida. They took me in, they just helped me, they loved me and cared for me. So I trusted them, and from seeing their relationship, I would have never imagined that they ever had any issues in their marriage. So that trust, and then just from the way the therapist was, that I knew, because you have to understand that as a physician, I don't want some things to get out there, about my life or what I've said. And I was working for the Veterans Administration at the time. So, it's not like it's anything bad or anything. It's just things that are embarrassing, relationship issues. And, like I said, when we come in here, it's like we feel like we're in between two cultures. So it was difficult to even get into find someone that I could get along with, and then you're in one relationship, you feel trapped in the relationship, then, but people don't see that side. All they see is, he's had all these different relationships. Why did he leave this person? But no one actually knows what was going on in the relationship. But the way I looked at it is, I only have one life to live. I'm not going to sit in a miserable relationship for the rest of my life. I'm not going to be in a marriage where I'm so miserable to the point of wanting to commit suicide, but I'm sitting in because I don't want people to realize that, I left, I got a divorce, because that's against our culture. I don't care about that. I guess that's the American in me. It's like, no, I'm not going to make my life miserable just so that I can count years and say, I've been married 30 years. But you've been married 30 years and you've been miserable for 30 years. What's that worth to you? And you sit in those situations, it's messing your children up at the same time, because they are seeing what you're going through. They see how miserable you guys are at home. But then when you're in public, you're putting up a face like everything is perfect.
That's in Nigeria, in the Yoruba language, you say, Akika said. That's wonderful. One thing though, you mentioned something about the cost of therapy. Isn't that kind of difficult for immigrants to actually deal with? Or how do we, if you have any way of letting us know, how do they approach therapy knowing that it won't cost them much?
Well, again, you have to see what's important to you and what's your priority. The way I look at it is that whatever is important to you, we'll do it. The same people that can afford to pay for. So let me give you an example. Like, I run a substance abuse clinic. The same patients who can't afford to pay me $100 for therapy they are paying $100 a day to buy drugs. So it's just a matter of what's priority and what's important to you. The same people that can afford to pay for therapy, they can afford to, looking at our culture, our people, they can afford to buy designer shoes, they can afford to buy designer belts and expensive cars. So it's a matter of what's priority to you. And I think that's what we need to look at, is prioritize it. But now, though, most insurances will cover mental health. Even Medicaid will cover mental health and substance abuse treatment. But at the same time, I still feel people just need to prioritize things. We need to make our mental health a priority. And if you look at it as a priority, then you're not going to mind spending the money for you to do what you need to do.
Dr. Fatoki, thank you so much. You've really been quite transparent. And your transparency, I think that will help a lot of immigrants, not just Nigerians, because we all really are the same, to understand how to go about what they're experiencing in their homes. And you really have been so clear about all of this. So we want to thank you so much. For our audience, thank you for listening to our podcast on immigrants' desires to come to America and their dilemmas in staying in America. We hope this episode has been helpful and informative. Remember, adapting to a new culture can be difficult, but with the right guidance and support, it is possible. Please help us to further our efforts in alleviating immigrant struggles. Please share and subscribe to this podcast. We also want you to share your story because many immigrants need motivation. Call us or text us on desire.dilemma at 708-351-2687. 708-351-2687. Visit our website for more stories on desire-dilemma.com or email us on desire.dilemma@gmail.com. Join us again on Desire Dilemma, a podcast that amplifies immigrant voices in America. Thank you and have a wonderful rest of your day.